In the dead of night, when the world outside feels calm and silent, there are shadows that watch, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Tonight, you will hear two stories that sound like something torn straight from a nightmare, but every detail is terrifyingly real. Imagine driving down a pitch-black country road and seeing a pale figure in a white dress standing among the trees, her face twisted, her voice whispering, "I see you." Now picture yourself trapped in the backseat of a taxi after midnight. The driver staring at you through the mirror, smiling, ignoring your directions as he drives past your exit. These aren't ghost stories made to spook you around a campfire. These are accounts of real people who were hunted, stalked, and forced to fight for survival. As you listen, ask yourself if it were you. Would you have made it out alive? Welcome to The Price Paid, where true horror is exposed and nightmares come to life. Hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. The night was colder than usual for that part of the South, the kind of biting air that makes your breath hang in the dark like smoke. The narrator insisted that he lived a straight-edge lifestyle, no alcohol, no drugs, nothing that could distort the mind, which made what he was about to witness all the more disturbing, because he could never dismiss it as a drunken blur or some trick of imagination. This was real, and it began on the lonely back roads leading to a friend's New Year's Eve party. He described the roads as narrow and twisting, lined on both sides by thick, tangled trees that seemed to lean in closer the farther you drove. That night, he had no choice but to use his high beams, even though he hated blinding other drivers. But there were no other cars, just an endless stretch of cracked pavement and shadows pressing against the headlights. The only sign of life was a single shack he always passed on the way to Darren's neighborhood, a structure that looked abandoned for years, yet every now and then, faint lights flickered inside as if someone still lived there. It already felt wrong, but nothing could have prepared him for what appeared ahead. On a rare, straight stretch of road, his headlights illuminated a figure, something pale against the black. At first, he thought it might be a deer caught in the beam, but as he drew closer, his stomach dropped. It was a woman. She was standing completely still at the edge of the trees, not moving, not even flinching. She wore a long white dress, thin and flowing, the kind of thing someone might wear to bed decades ago. Her clothing was all wrong for the freezing night, and yet she didn't shiver. He kept driving, tense and alert, worried she might suddenly step into the road. She didn't. She remained frozen, her face obscured in the glare of the lights. Only when he passed and glanced into his rearview mirror did his skin crawl. She had turned her body, not to walk, but just to follow his car with her gaze, unmoving, a lifeless statue watching him leave. The party itself was normal, lively even. Music, laughter, drinks for those who wanted them, the countdown to midnight. He stayed late, as usual, helping Darren's family clean up after the guests had gone home. By the time he finally left, his car was the only one left parked outside. The celebration was over, but the unease from earlier had not faded. He wondered about the woman he saw. Was she stranded? Was she in trouble? But something inside him knew better. When he started the car, a warning light flashed. Low tire pressure. At first, he dismissed it as the usual winter problem with his older car. He told himself it would be fine, that he could make it home. The alternate route was longer and riskier, with drunk drivers still roaming the highways. Against his instincts, he took the same dark road back. The first few minutes were quiet until he felt the car dragging, pulling oddly. A screech of metal followed. One by one, the tires failed, until the vehicle rolled to a helpless stop in the middle of nowhere. He killed the engine, stepped out into suffocating darkness, and checked each tire with the light on his phone. What he saw made his blood run cold. Not one, not two, but all four tires had been shredded, not punctured, torn, as though claws had raked them apart deliberately. The realization was instant. This was no accident. Someone had done this. And then the silence came, an unnatural quiet that smothered everything. No wind, no animals, no rustling leaves. The forest had gone dead, like the world was holding its breath. Then, a sound. A twig snapping, deliberate, close by. He turned off his phone light and stood still, heart pounding in the dark. The rustling of leaves followed, slow and steady, not the frantic scurry of a small animal. This was different. This was hunting. Then, a voice. A woman's voice, soft, calm, almost tender. "I see you." The words floated out from the black tree line not 20 feet away. His chest tightened. He couldn't move, couldn't even scream. The voice came again, just as quiet. "Can you see me?" That was when panic took over. He flicked on his flashlight and pointed it at the trees. She was there, the woman in the white dress. But this time he saw her clearly. Her gown was filthy, smeared with dark stains. Her body was skeletal, starved. Her skin looked like it had been drained of life, stretched tight over sharp bones. Her gray hair hung in long, filthy tangles down to her elbows, and her face, what remained of it, was grotesque. It looked as if half her jaw was missing, torn away, yet somehow she smiled at him, or at least tried to. Instinct took over. He ran. He sprinted down the road in blind desperation, the snapping of branches behind him confirming that she was following. He didn't look back. The only thing he thought about was getting to Darren's house. The shack, that lonely structure in the woods, crossed his mind briefly. Was that her home? Did she come from there? The thought terrified him, but he had no time to consider it. He pounded on Darren's door until someone opened it. Darren's mother pulled him inside when she saw his state. He was shaking, babbling, trying to explain. They believed him enough to let him stay the night and call the police. But the nightmare didn't end there. At 3:14 a.m., he woke to a sound at the window. A tapping, light but persistent. He froze in bed, staring at the dark glass. Then came the voice again, muffled but unmistakable. "I see you." She had followed him. She had come to the house. He never dared to look out the window. He stayed awake until sunrise, praying she would disappear. The next morning, Darren's father found something in the yard where the voice had come from. A rusty knife, old and jagged. The police took it, assuming it had been used to slash the tires. When questioned, other guests admitted seeing a woman in a white dress wandering outside during the party, but thought nothing of it. The police checked the shack along the road, but it was empty except for the corpses of gutted animals strewn across the surrounding woods. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, she was gone. She was never found. And the unanswered questions linger. How did she find him so quickly? How could she speak so clearly with half her face destroyed? And perhaps the most disturbing was she even human at all. He swore he would return to Darren's next New Year's party, but this time he would never take that road again, because somewhere, in the shadows of those woods, she might still be waiting. Airports at midnight are strange places. The rush of the day is gone, leaving hollow echoes in the terminals. When the narrator landed after a trip to San Diego, he was exhausted and ready to get home. It was past 12:30 when he rolled his bag to the ground transportation pickup, and the usual flood of rideshares had thinned out. A yellow minivan taxi was waiting, its driver leaning against the hood. $30 for a ride home was too good to pass up. He loaded his own bag into the back seat, brushing off the driver's attempt to help, and climbed inside. The man behind the wheel looked to be in his mid-40s, with heavy lines around his eyes and a forced smile. From the start, something felt off. He pulled up directions on his phone, but the screen was tilted away, just enough to keep the passenger from reading it. The ride began quietly, the highway nearly empty, city lights shrinking in the rear view. That was when the driver's eyes met his through the mirror-ronce. Then again. On the second time he spoke. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. The answer, San Diego. "Very nice," the driver said before asking, "What were you doing there?" "Visiting a friend." The driver's smile widened. "Is your friend as pretty as you?" The words made the air in the van feel heavier. It wasn't just the comment, it was the timing. It was too soon, too deliberate. The narrator laughed it off weakly, but the driver pressed on. "A pretty girl like you traveling alone? That's not safe." The passenger snapped back lightly, saying she hadn't been alone. She had visited a friend. But the driver's response was sharp. Flying alone means you're still alone. The conversation felt like a trap, and she knew it. He kept asking, voice sliding between teasing and prying until finally she tried to shut it down by putting in her earbuds, though they were dead. It was just a prop, a barrier. Yet the questions didn't stop. When the highway exit to her neighborhood appeared, the van didn't slow down. She called out, "This is my exit," but he drove past it without hesitation. She shouted again, more forcefully. He apologized, claiming he would take the next one. His excuse didn't convince her. She tried to see the GPS, but the angle blocked her. Her pulse quickened. She sat forward, ready. At the next exit, she demanded, loud and clear, that he get off. This time, he did, but not before glaring at her in the mirror, his face briefly twisting into something darker. Then came the most chilling question of the ride. "Do you have a boyfriend?" Her answer was instant. Yes, he lived with her. The speed of her reply must have given her away because the driver smirked. "What's his name?" The question felt invasive, intentional, almost like an interrogation. She cut him off by saying she would put her headphones in and ignore him. Her heart hammered in her chest. She texted her family and friends, sharing her location just in case. The van rolled into her town, now eerily empty, at nearly 1 a.m. At a red light, the driver stared at her through the mirror again. He wasn't watching the traffic. He was watching her. She noticed the green light reflected in his eyes before she even realized it had changed. "It's green," she muttered, and he jerked the van forward. Her phone buzzed. Only her brother responded. He told her to leave the car if she felt unsafe. The next red light changed everything. Parked off to the side of the road was a police cruiser. Without thinking, she grabbed her bag, shoved the van door open, and jumped out. The driver yelled after her, tried to shut the door with the front controls, but she fought it open and ran straight toward the police car. The officer inside rolled down his window as she begged for help. Behind her, the van pulled away, disappearing into the night. She explained enough to convince the officer to drive her home. The ride was brief, but her mind kept circling one terrifying thought. The driver knew her address. She had given it at the start. As soon as she got inside, she locked the door and collapsed into bed without unpacking. But sleep did not come easily. Just as her eyelids began to close, there was a knock at her door. Soft at first, then harder. Over and over, for minutes at a time. She stayed frozen in her room, clutching her phone, never daring to approach. When the knocking stopped, silence returned. But she knew someone had been there, and she knew who. The following day, while she was at work, her neighbor George called. He said her father had been at the apartment, trying to get in through the windows, but her father was at work, hours away. He hadn't been there. The description chilled Harriet matched the time when the knocking had happened. Someone was pretending to be her family. Someone was testing her locks. That night, she returned to pack a bag, ready to leave for her parents' house. But something inside the apartment felt wrong. The air seemed heavier, charged. She kept hearing faint creaks in the floorboards, as if someone else was there. She tried to ignore it, folding clothes, stuffing them into her bag. Just as she was about to leave, a sound came from down the hallway. A voice. Calm, low, and too close. "I wasn't going to hurt you." Then an arm swung into view from behind the wall, reaching out. She didn't wait to see more. She bolted for the door, screaming, pounding on George's door until he and his wife rushed out. Together they called the police, who searched her apartment. The place was small, easy to check, but the sliding back door was wide open. Whoever it was had already fled into the night. She had no cab number, no plate, nothing to give the police except a description. A middle-aged man, a yellow minivan, and a trail of terror. The taxi driver, if that's what he really was gone. She stayed with her parents for a week. Her father helped her install cameras when she returned, and she bought a taser for her bedside. She moved apartments twice after that, but the paranoia never fully left. Every creak of the floor, every unexpected knock on the door carried the memory of that night, and she never again trusted a taxi hailed off the curb. Because the question remained, was that man a real driver, or was it all just a trap? A stolen vehicle? A predator with a plan? Either way, she had narrowly escaped becoming another story that never reached an ending. Fear has a way of lingering long after the danger has passed. For the people in these stories, survival did not bring comfort. Instead, it left them with haunting questions that refused to be answered, doubts that twist the memory of what happened into something far worse than the moment itself. The mind replays details over and over, searching for logic, for closure, but none is found. That is the true cruelty of encounters like these. The horror does not end when you escape. It festers inside you, whispering that the nightmare might still be out there. Take the woman in the white dress. To some, she might sound like a ghost story, a fragment of folklore that drifts through rural towns. But the narrator insists she was real. He saw her eyes, her ruined face, her skeletal frame. He heard her voice, twice, speaking words far too human to dismiss as supernatural. And yet, the more you consider the details, the harder it is to explain. Who could endure such a freezing night in nothing but a thin, filthy gown? Who could shred 4 car tires with such precision? And most of all, how could someone missing half of her jaw speak so clearly? Each piece of the story bends reality until it feels like something between the living and the dead, a creature that doesn't fit into either world. The police tried to treat it as a crime, searching the shack, collecting evidence. But what they found only deepened the mystery. Dead animals gutted in the surrounding woods. A rusty knife left in the yard. These were not the signs of a passing stranger. They were the habits of someone who had been there a long time, living off cruelty and fear. Perhaps she was a hermit, deranged and violent, hiding in the woods. Or perhaps she was something else entirely, something unexplainable that had chosen him as prey that night. The question that keeps him awake isn't whether she was human, but whether she is still out there, waiting for him on another New Year's Eve. Then there is the story of the taxi. At first glance, it seems straightforward, a dangerous man targeting a vulnerable passenger. But even that explanation leaves too many holes. Was he truly a licensed taxi driver? Or had he stolen the vehicle, using it as bait to lure unsuspecting riders into his trap? His questions were not casual conversation. They were pointed, invasive, designed to strip away her defenses. Asking about boyfriends, asking namesit, felt like an attempt to measure how safe she really was, how likely someone would come looking for her if she vanished. And when she ran, he did not chase her. He simply drove away, which raises the most unsettling possibility of all. She was never his only target. Maybe he left because there were other people to find, other women standing alone by the curb. And what about the knocks at her door? The neighbor's report of her father trying to get in. These details are almost more terrifying than the ride itself. They mean the danger followed her home. He knew where she lived. He came back, and then the voice inside the apartment, calm and chilling. I wasn't going to hurt you. It suggests he was there, inside, watching, waiting for her. The thought of a stranger slipping silently into your home while you go about your night is enough to unravel the mind. She escaped, yes, but the invasion left a scar. She can never again trust the safety of her own walls. The locks felt weaker. The shadows seemed longer. What connects both of these stories is the ambiguity. In neither case was the threat ever fully resolved. The woman in the woods was never caught, never identified. The taxi driver disappeared into the night, his identity unknown, his motives guessed but never proven. And in both cases, what lingers is the not knowing. We can accept almost anything, no matter how horrific, if we understand it. But when we don't, when the horror remains undefined, it seeps deeper into us. It becomes not just a memory, but a shadow that follows. Some might argue that fear of the unknown is the most powerful fear of all. The mind fills in the blanks with something worse than reality could ever provide. Was the woman in the gown even alive? Or had the narrator stumbled onto something otherworldly? Was the taxi driver a predator? Or was he part of something larger, a network of men who used the anonymity of the night to hunt? The imagination twists these questions until every creak of the floor, every figure in the distance feels like proof that the nightmare has returned. The characters in these stories live with that shadow. For the man who saw the woman in white, every trip down a back road is now laced with dread. He avoids that route, yet the memory is still there, waiting, like she is. For the woman in the taxi, every time she steps into a vehicle with a stranger behind the wheel, she wonders if this will be the night the questions return. And in their stories lies a chilling truth for the rest of us. Horror doesn't need to end in death to leave scars. Sometimes survival is its own punishment,
Yes, sir.
forcing you to carry the weight of what you saw, what you heard, and what you still don't understand. That is the essence of true terror, not the act itself, but the aftermath. Not the scream in the woods, but the silence afterward. Not the knock at the door, but the fear of who might still be standing on the other side. These are not campfire tales or ghost stories passed down to thrill children. These are moments that happened to real people, moments that slipped from the ordinary into the unthinkable, leaving them forever haunted. And perhaps the most unsettling thought is this: if it could happen to them, it could happen to you. When fear presses in from all sides, when the world suddenly shifts from ordinary to hostile, survival becomes the only thought left in the human mind. These two stories reveal something beyond the horror itself. They show us the instinct, the raw primal force that pushes people to run, to fight, or to hide. Survival is not always about strength. Often it is about listening to that whisper in your chest that tells you something is wrong, even when reason tries to convince you otherwise. It is about trusting the unease in your bones and acting before it is too late. Consider the man on the country road. He could have dismissed the woman in white as nothing more than a stranded traveler. He could have pulled over, rolled down his window, asked if she needed help. Many people would have. But something in her stillness, in the way she stood among the trees, silenced that part of him. He drove past, refusing the urge to stop, and that decision may have saved his life. Later, when his car was sabotaged and he was stranded, his choices again became a matter of instinct. To stay in the car and risk whatever was lurking in the woods, or to flee into the night. He chose to run. His body responded before his mind had time to argue. That was survival, pure and simple. Had he hesitated longer, had he doubted himself, He might have ended up like the gutted animals the police found near the shack. His survival was not luck, it was the animal part of him, screaming that danger was close. Now think of the young woman in the taxi. The moment the driver skipped her exit, the truth settled into her chest. She could have stayed quiet, let him correct himself, trusted his apology, but instinct told her this was not a mistake. It was deliberate. Her decision to confront him, to demand he exit, was the first step. The second was even braver, leaping out of the vehicle in the middle of the night, bag in hand, while he shouted after her. She could have stayed seated, terrified, waiting for him to decide her fate. But she didn't. She acted. When her brother texted her to leave if she felt threatened, she didn't hesitate. That leap was the difference between escape and something unthinkable. Her body moved before doubt could catch up. That is survival. In both cases, survival meant abandoning normal rules. We are taught to be polite, to avoid overreacting, to assume the best in strangers. But those rules are dangerous when the stakes are life or death. If the man had chosen politeness over instinct, he might have rolled down his window and invited the woman closer. If the young woman had chosen patience over panic, she might have stayed in the taxi until the doors locked and her options disappeared. Survival required breaking those rules. It required listening to the voice that told them, run. And yet, survival's never clean. It does not end when the immediate threat is gone. Instead, it leaves scars. The body escapes, but the mind keeps replaying every second, every choice. Survivors often ask themselves endless questions. Did I overreact? Could I have handled it differently? What if I had done the opposite? That doubt gnaws at them. Even when the truth is simple, they live because they trusted themselves. The scars remain as reminders, not just of what happened, but of how fragile the line between life and death really is. There is another lesson here, one that anyone can take to heart. Preparation matters. The man stranded on the road had no phone service, no backup plan. He was lucky that running saved him. But what if he had been miles farther? Or what if she had cut him off before he reached safety? The woman in the taxi was wise enough to text her family and share her location. But she still stepped into a stranger's car with no record, no receipt, nothing to trace him. Their stories show us the value of small precaution, choosing safer routes, avoiding isolated rides, carrying tools for self-defense. These decisions can mean everything when the ordinary night suddenly turns predatory. Still, the most important lesson is this. Listen to yourself. Fear is not always irrational. It is a warning system sharpened through thousands of years of survival. When the hair on your neck rises, when your stomach knots, when silence becomes too heavy to explain, that is instinct telling you danger is near. Too often people ignore it out of politeness, out of fear of embarrassment, out of the desperate need to believe everything is fine. But the truth is, it is better to be wrong and safe than to ignore the feeling and end up another cautionary tale. The survivors in these stories remind us that survival depends not on ignoring fear, but on respecting it. In a way, both of them paid a price for listening to their instincts. They survive, yes, but they also carry the aftermath. Sleepless nights, the memory of voices in the dark, the weight of eyes watching them. That is the cost of survival. But the alternative, the silence of never coming home, is far worse. So they endured. They chose the harder path, the one that kept them alive, even if it meant never truly feeling safe again. These stories are not warnings meant only for the people who lived them. They are warnings for us all. If you find yourself on an empty road and something feels wrong, trust it. If a stranger in control of your path begins to unsettle you, act on it. Do not wait for proof. Do not wait for danger to show its teeth. By then, it may be too late. Remember, survival does not come from strength or luck alone. It comes from that deep, primal voice inside you that whispers when something is not right. All you have to do is listen. When the lights fade and the stories settle into silence, what remains is the uneasy truth that real horror is not always about monsters or spirits. It is about moments when the world shifts into something dangerous and unpredictable. The man on the back road and the woman in the taxi both stepped into ordinary situations. A drive to a friend's house, a late night ride home. Neither expected terror to come creeping out of the shadows, but that is what makes these stories so disturbing. They prove that the boundary between the safe and the unsafe can be crossed without warning, and survival often depends on a single choice. The woman in white embodies the fear of the unknown. She was not just strange, she was wrong something that should not have been able to exist, yet did. Whether she was human, deranged, or something beyond explanation, her presence shattered the comfort of the familiar road. She followed, she hunted, and she lingered long after the night was supposed to be over. The lesson here is clear. Trust your instincts. The narrator could have convinced himself that she needed help, but instead he recognized the dread in his chest for what it was. That decision saved his life. The taxi driver's story shows a different kind of horror, one that is all too real. It was not about the supernatural, but about predation hidden in plain sight. A stranger behind the wheel, using charm and small talk to lower defenses, ignoring directions to take control. The woman's survival came not from strength, but from courage. The courage to break the rules, to run from a moving vehicle, to pound on a police officer's window rather than sit quietly and hope. Her story reminds us that it is better to risk embarrassment than to risk silence that ends in tragedy. Both survivors teach us the same truth. Fear is not weakness. It is a signal, a gift, something designed to keep us alive. Too often, people ignore it because they do not want to seem rude, paranoid, or foolish. But fear does not lie. When your body tells you to run, listen. When something feels off, do not hesitate. The cost of survival may be sleepless nights and haunting memories, but the cost of ignoring instinct is far worse. So, what should you do if you ever find yourself in their place? Take precautions. Share your location. Carry tools for defense. Avoid isolation when you can. But above all, trust your gut. These two stories are not just tales to frighten you. They are reminders that evil, human or otherwise, can find us when we least expect it. The difference between those who survive and those who vanish often comes down to a single moment of listening to that voice inside. You have heard the price they paid for their survival. Now ask yourself, if you were in the same position, would you act quickly enough to live? Stay aware, stay safe, and never forget true horror waits where you least expect it. And if you want to hear more terrifying accounts of survival against the darkness, subscribe to The Price Paid, because the next story could be yours.